Hi, this is Tutor Nick P, and this is Lesson 12. Today we're going to look at the difference between assume versus presume. Well, obviously assume is a lot more common, and presume we don't hear as much, but it does come up, and students will often ask me the difference when this does come up. So let's look at some differences right away that one way we could distinguish. I mean, both of them actually, somebody just thinks something is some way and it could be wrong. So in this way, it is similar, but we can clearly see some differences. First, assume is informal and is much more commonly used. Yeah, we often hear people say they assume this or they assume that. Presume is more formal and is used in more official situations, especially in law. Or court, or things that are official. Yeah, so something to do with police, something in court cases, something in law, we tend to hear presume used more. The difference between the two words is also based on the level of certainty, how sure you are about something. Assume has less certainty. Presume has some reasonable certainty, but both could be wrong. So again, you do see that there's some point where there are similarities, but assume has less certainty. It's based on more of just thinking and feeling. Presume is based on some evidence. So let's look on. The use of assume is often based on feelings without any effort to check facts. Alright, let's look at the definition to assume. To just think something is true without any proof or evidence. And a lot of times we often hear people say this. We often hear people say, don't just assume. So here's the first example. Don't just assume if you go to that restaurant several hours before your booking that they will have a table available for you. So maybe it's a little bit based on hope. Maybe you're thinking that it should be just true, but it may not really be true. They probably won't. This has the feeling of like it was careless. You should have called. You should have checked to make sure your thinking was right or your thinking was correct. All right, let's look at the second one. Don't just assume the boss will give you the promotion because you have more seniority. This one might even be based on your own bias. You want it to be true, you think you deserve it, so you might assume it for that reason. You're not really basing it, on too many facts here. So assume has a more negative connotation to it, as though the person was, again, careless or lazy. You should have done more checking. You should have looked it up. Or you should have known better that there's a good chance that it's really not correct. We often hear, again, just to repeat again, we often hear people say, don't just assume. I can actually remember this when I was in elementary school. I don't know, I think it was maybe the 3rd grade or the 4th grade. I remember the teacher invited, because I went to a Catholic school, and the teacher invited, it was a female teacher, and she invited the priest in to explain this to us. And that seemed weird because, he didn't normally teach us. And this is what the priest said. He wrote this on the board, and I guess they wanted to teach the students, this point. And I don't know, maybe this has been repeated some other times before. But they say, if you assume, you will make an ass out of you and me. And they wrote the word assume on the board. That's what he did. So he said, if you assume, and he pointed to the word ass, you will make an ass out of you, because here is, just the letter you and me. I don't know, why did they do this? I don't know, I'm thinking back now, possibly, maybe at that time, maybe some students might go home and tell their parents, the teacher said ASS in class today. And maybe if they have the priest do it, maybe nobody will say anything because it was the priest. He was just explaining, he's trying to teach. Now, of course, my reasoning could be wrong. I'm kind of assuming that could be the answer. I really have no way to check. Obviously, I could not call the school or find the teachers anymore. I'm not even sure if the priest who did this is even still alive. But you know, that would be assuming. So this is again, this is a way that we often hear people say it. Again, it has a little bit of a negative feeling to it. Presume is not as negative. Presume says to presume, to think something is correct because you think it's likely. You think it's much more likely to be correct. You could still be wrong, but it's more likely to be correct. To be true, usually based on some evidence or some reasonable evidence, but it has not been confirmed or proven for certain. Then we could say, you know, we often might use presume in this sense. And I gave you a few examples here. I presumed you wouldn't like this dish because you usually don't like spicy food. All right, here you actually do have some evidence. You have some experience. Maybe you know this person, and they don't usually like spicy food. So you think, it's very highly likely he doesn't like this. So, in a very formal way, you may have said, I presumed you wouldn't like this. So because you think it's highly likely, it's not true. Of course, you could be wrong. Maybe this is an exception. Maybe he likes this particular dish. Some witnesses, this is the second example, some witnesses saw that drunk tourist fall off the cruise ship. His body was never recovered and he is presumed dead. Yeah, you hear this on the news a lot. If somebody just disappeared in a mountain, they haven't been heard of from a long time. We don't think it's, is it possible that he could have been rescued from somebody? Maybe like in one of these movies, maybe he was rescued and he had amnesia and he forgot who he was. Not very likely. So this is why we often say, somebody is presumed dead. Yeah, if somebody fell into the ocean, nobody's usually that good enough swimmer to be able to swim all the way to shore. So chances are highly likely, he might be dead, unfortunately. So again, especially with police reports or court, we hear, presumed dead. And another one, this also goes back to maybe why courts use it, or in law. Remember, there is a law that says that, you should, that like if you're a juror, on a jury, you should have the presumption of innocence. And of course they do this because, they want to lower the chance of someone being falsely convicted or accused. So you should try to presume this person is innocent unless it can be proven very strongly that he is guilty. So we say presumption of innocence. The burden of proof must be on the accuser, not on the defendant. Yeah, so you hope that jurors will keep that in mind, that the amount of evidence should be kind of overwhelming, that it makes you more certain, because just like we say, we don't want to falsely convict somebody of a crime. Alright, I hope that clarifies it for you. Again, just to resume, just to review it, remember, assume tends to be a little more negative, we tend to think somebody was careful, they were just thinking something is true based on feelings, possibly based on bias, possibly, that they really didn't make any effort to check it out. Presume, there might have been some evidence, but again, it hasn't been proven for sure, but because of that little bit of evidence, you think that it's more likely that it's true. So we often might use presume in that sense. Okay, thank you very much. Again, I hope that clarifies.